Welcome. My name is James Boretti, and I'm the president and CEO of Boretti Incorporated. Boretti Incorporated has been around since January of 2003, and we're a small company with a large footprint. We firmly believe that businesses can be better through safety. Today, I'd like to share with you one of our many success stories with a global high-tech company we've been working with for almost 2 decades, taking them from zero to integration. So the company we're talking about that we're sharing this success story with really is an interesting success in itself. Today, about 80% of the electronics that we work with, use on a daily basis will have their memory actually in it, some form of memory there. So essentially, about 35 years ago, they started out in a garage with 4 employees, okay, and they grew into this global entity today. They're about $17 billion a year, in annual sales. So safety has been part of that success. Company growth was made in part by the product guarantee and replacement process that they made as a commitment to their customers in the marketplace. Essentially, it's this. If you have a product that goes wrong or something is wrong with it when you receive it or use it just in the most immediate past, all you have to do is return it to them for a free replacement. So initially, when the company actually was growing from that $900 million to the $3.1 billion in annual sales, what occurred was they had written a business continuity plan. This was something they recognized was a need to make sure and address a business risk that they saw globally. And the idea was the business continuity plan is if there's any kind of local crisis that occurs, then another entity, another location where they are at, could pick up the slack and then still provide the product to the customers that they had without, with minimal business interruption. So what happened was when they wrote that business continuity plan, they were already talking to 4 OEMs about being able to provide and build product that would go into their electronic, products, basically. And so what happened was they showed this business continuity plan to the 4 different entities they were at, and this actually separated them from their competitors. As a result, it gave those OEMs confidence that this company, in the event of any kind of an emergency crisis, could be there and actually provide them with their product with minimal interruption. And as a result, they got all that business. And so it went from $900 million into a $3.1 billion enterprise within a 30-day period. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of rapid growth that's going to have to be managed. It's great to have as a company. That's a wonderful problem to have, but that also can breed some safety issues, as you might imagine. So from that standpoint, they didn't really take care of safety. And as a result, ended up with, we'll just say in the hundreds, the number of injuries they were experiencing globally. And just to give you an idea, $1.4 million a year was spent on injuries alone in the US. Some of the injuries that were occurring during this great rapid growth spurt that the company was experiencing were things like strain sprains from extended reaches, repetitive motion, and also back injuries from a lot of manual handling tasks that not necessarily needed to be done. They could be things that actually could be better off if they mechanized it or came up with different ways and engineered the proper processes. The customers, while they liked the business continuity plan because it gave them the confidence about the company's ability to provide product, even in the event of a local emergency crisis, they didn't like the high number of injuries that were occurring. And the company understood this, and they recognized that injuries reduce the capability of the human resources that lead to success. As a matter of fact, the president of the company did say, and I quote, "I can replace product and I can replace buildings, but I cannot replace the people that make this a success." After that, the safety department was born. They started with JSAs so they would understand the hazards of the job, understand safe job practices that were needed, and identify safety training to help people apply safety as part of what they were doing. They also conducted a safety assessment to identify where the operational process was strong with safety, where it was weak, and identify the gaps that they needed to work on. The safety consultants working with them also focused on understanding the business as a whole, as it provides the big picture for resource needs, and you can identify where attention needed to be placed to gain buy-in for safety that would be needed. The company recognized that in order to really truly address and manage the process here from a safety standpoint, they needed to get people who had an education, knowledge, experience in getting safety into the company and starting to manage and control the risks and the hazards that were leading to all the injuries that were occurring that, again, the customers didn't like. So as a result of that, they figured the best way to do that was look to the outside for a trained, educated, credentialed, experienced person in the safety field to be able to take this on. The problem with that is the company has a unique culture, a very unique culture that's very difficult for people from the outside to navigate, when they first come through the door. In fact, it does take a few years before people who come from the outside get used to and understand how the company culture works. So while they hired safety professionals from the outside, it was met with great disaster. They didn't last long. And that was both as an agreement by the company and the safety professional that came in and took the job. So instead, what they ended up doing was identifying people internally who had an interest in safety and bringing it and leading it forward within the company. So they then decided they were going to go ahead and identify those individuals and pay for and provide support of resources for their education, the supportive resources that were needed to be able to get these things implemented and all of those kinds of things. And once that became much more efficient and functional, that's when they started to look to the outside for the expertise that they needed, because they already had someone internally who could now manage that process. That's when they started hiring, and they did end up hiring a lot of people from the outside with the education, the knowledge, the experience, and safety to great success. So as that happens, now they're doing this in one location. And the idea is to model that, and then once they get it right and successful, then they roll out that model elsewhere around the globe. And that has been replicated in all their locations throughout the world. So once they had all the systems in place and the people were there and they were starting to really become very efficient, very good at what they were doing in managing the safety aspect, they were asked if they would get and become credentialed. In fact, the company had decided they were going to do that because they saw a need for this going forward as a global entity. So they started to invest into safety management systems and become credentialed, first with OSAS 18001, and then now, currently today, graduating over successfully to ISO 45001. But it didn't stop there. One of the things they also started doing was to do transparency and disclosing, like through the Carbon Disclosure Project and also through the Global Reporting Initiative, both of which actually expand beyond the safety area into sustainability. So you might wonder what the benefits were of undertaking all these different efforts, all these different safety efforts that they did. They started, remember, in the hundreds, the kinds of injuries they were having throughout the world, and have now reduced it down to 7 incidences annually, 87% of which aren't even injuries. They're non-injury incidences. As you can imagine, that also has had a significant reduction in costs. So if you recall, there were $1.4 million being spent annually on injuries in the US location alone. And today, globally, they spend about $1,000 or less for these incidences that occur on an annual basis. Other benefits of doing this kind of process also led to prevention through design. So now, today, when they look at having to create a different product and come up with a different engineering scheme for all of this to work, what they do is they engineer out the hazards. They look at the equipment, they look at the way the equipment's going to work within the whole process itself, and they engineer that out. Not only that, they also look at the job design that's going to be needed in order for that process to become very efficient in the manufacturing scope, and they also consider the job design and human interaction along with that as they move it forward. Today, the company is about $17 billion a year, but they're continuing to grow. And what has expanded that is the transparency that they now provide through the Carbon Disclosure Project and the Global Reporting Initiative for Sustainability. This has gained, their customers' trust, with regard to the type of safety systems they have in place and also what they're doing in an expanded role from a sustainability standpoint. Our role as a company actually started before even getting to the job safety analysis process. We were brought in to actually start with the job safety analysis that then led to the risk assessment that was done that identified all the strength areas within the operational system and process with regard to safety, but also the gaps that needed to be closed. So starting from that standpoint, we were the ones that actually came out, started developing the program, started the initiation of training all the people and the key individuals, including engineering groups, as well as the finance group within the company, in terms of how safety impacts them and how that can actually lead to a more efficient process. From there, we were the ones that actually told the company as they continued to grow that they needed to have a safety department. They couldn't rely upon consultants to continue as they continue to grow themselves. And so we helped guide them in developing and implementing that safety department. Once that department was in place and people were becoming much more educated and experienced with regard to what they were doing, our focus then shifted to how we can support that department and then lead into the certification process by developing the kinds of programs and the initiatives that were needed to be successful in attaining the OSAS first certification, 18001 certification first, then rolling successfully into the ISO 45001 certification, both of which they obtained with their first validation audit. So we knew we were all headed the right direction. Now, as they continue to expand and their marketplace continues to expand globally, we're helping them to identify sustainability efforts and things along those lines that they need to dive into and find out what they need to address with regard to gaps, build upon the strengths they have, and continue to move that department forward as a valuable entity within the organization itself. It has been an interesting journey with this company, one of many that we've actually had the journey with as a company. And so with our company and the type of consultation we provide, it's both in the technical area as well as in the business system area. And it's fascinating because we actually work as a team together. So while it's impossible to have all of this under one person's belt, as a company, you can certainly do that. And that's what we've been able to leverage. People who are very good in the technical arena have helped out when they needed that, and people who are very good in the safety management system arena have helped out with that. So that's allowed us, in this case, to actually build the technical things such as lockout, blockout procedures for their individual equipment, address radiation safety concerns, and be very focused and specific with that and provide training for it as well. And then pivot to be able to build a safety management system that is in conformance with ISO 45001 and then be able to get that certification. So that is the uniqueness that our company has brought to this success story that we are sharing with you today.